The night was quiet. A steam locomotive thundered across the Missouri countryside, its iron wheels echoing through the darkness. Inside the passenger cars, families talked softly while businessmen counted their money. The conductor had made this journey dozens of times. Nothing seemed unusual. Then the train came to a sudden stop. Masked riders emerged from the trees, rifles pointed at the crew. Within minutes, the safe was broken open. Thousands of dollars were gone, and the outlaws disappeared into the night before anyone could stop them. Across America, newspapers exploded with headlines. The same name appeared again and again: Jesse James. To some Americans, he was a fearless rebel standing against powerful banks and railroad companies. To others, he was nothing more than a cold-blooded killer who left innocent people dead wherever he went. More than 140 years after his death, Jesse James remains one of the most famous outlaws in history. His life inspired novels, Hollywood films, television shows, songs, and countless legends. But the real story is far more complicated than the myth. This is the true story of Jesse James. Long before the robberies, before the wanted posters, and before his name became known across America, Jesse Woodson James was simply a boy growing up on a farm. He was born on September 5, 1847, in Clay County, Missouri, a region that was still part of America's expanding western frontier. His parents, Robert and Zerelda James, were farmers who also owned enslaved people, reflecting the realities of Missouri before the Civil War. He was born on September 5, 1847, in Clay County, Missouri, a region that was still part of America's expanding western frontier. His parents, Robert and Zerelda James, were farmers who also owned enslaved people, reflecting the realities of Missouri before the Civil War. For Jesse, the loss of his father meant growing up without the guidance that many boys depended on. His mother eventually remarried, but life on the farm demanded constant work. Every day brought chores, responsibility, and long hours in the fields. To neighbors, Jesse appeared much like any other child in rural Missouri. No one could have predicted the future waiting for him. Yet the world around him was changing rapidly. To neighbors, Jesse appeared much like any other child in rural Missouri. No one could have predicted the future waiting for him. Yet the world around him was changing rapidly. It was a border state. Its people often disagreed about where their loyalty belonged. Some supported the Union, others supported the Confederacy. Families argued with neighbors. Brothers sometimes found themselves on opposite sides of the same conflict. As Jesse grew older, these political tensions became impossible to ignore. Meetings in town grew heated. Arguments turned violent. People began choosing sides. Then, in 1861, everything changed. The American Civil War began. Although Missouri officially remained in the Union, large parts of the state became battlefields controlled by competing armies and guerrilla fighters. Unlike many traditional battles fought on open fields, Missouri experienced something even more terrifying. Neighbors fought neighbors. Homes were burned. Families disappeared overnight. Entire communities lived in constant fear. For young Jesse, violence became part of everyday life. The peaceful farm where he had spent his childhood was no longer protected from the war raging around it. Instead of hearing only the sounds of livestock and wagons, families now listened for gunfire. Instead of worrying about harvests, they worried about surviving another day. Every new attack made the conflict more personal. The war was no longer something happening somewhere else. It had arrived at his doorstep. As the fighting intensified, armed groups known as guerrillas began operating throughout Missouri. Unlike regular soldiers, they launched surprise attacks before disappearing into forests and back roads. They knew the land better than anyone else, making them nearly impossible to catch. Some became local heroes. Others became feared killers. The line between soldier and outlaw slowly disappeared. Young men who had once worked farms suddenly carried rifles. Many believed they were defending their homes. Others simply became consumed by revenge. Among these fighters were two men whose names would become infamous across Missouri: William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson. Their brutal tactics shocked even experienced soldiers. Entire towns were attacked. For a teenager growing up surrounded by this violence, it became difficult to imagine life returning to normal. Jesse James was only a boy, but the world was preparing to turn him into something else entirely. The Civil War would shape every decision he made for the rest of his life. It would teach him how to ride, how to shoot, how to survive, and perhaps most importantly, how to live in a world where trust disappeared and violence became routine. Years later, Americans would remember Jesse James as a legendary outlaw, but legends are rarely born overnight. They are built, one moment at a time, and for Jesse James, that transformation was only just beginning. In the next chapter, a teenage farm boy will step into one of the bloodiest guerrilla wars in American history, a decision that will change his life forever and set him on the path toward becoming the most wanted man in America.